his dedication to Sarasota. Okay, the first item on this morning's agenda officially is the discussion section, and we will begin that with a presentation by the Supervisor of Elections, Kathy Dent. We had asked Ms. Dent to make a presentation to the board about some concerns that had arisen from the electronic voting machines. And Ms. Dent, thank you for your extra time and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. I can't tell you how happy I was when you asked me to come over here and speak to the Commission, because I think that it's very, very important that the voters of Sarasota County hear about some of the facts that actually involve our voting equipment here in Sarasota County. There's been a lot of misinformation that has been disseminated, and I want the voters of Sarasota County to have an opportunity to hear the information. So I thank you very much for the forum to be able to present information to them today. Now, for the better part of the last 3 days, I spent preparing written remarks. And last night about 9:30, I said to myself, Kathy, this is not you. Me standing and reading something is not the appropriate way to present this information. And most people that know me know that I'm an extemporaneous speaker. So I just want to go over the information with you, and then after I do my presentation, then I would like to take questions from you all. Let me read you something, and it's very short. How elections can be rigged via computers. Recently, 6 computer experts met in Westwood and devised their own form of war games. How to rig an election using computer techniques. To the 6 men involved, this was a game. To elections officials, it was a chilling look at the state of computer art and the implications it holds for future elections here. The computer is the key to elections in Los Angeles County. But there are a growing number of computer experts who contend it is possible to tell the machine to do its accuracy tests correctly and then to cheat a little bit in between the tests, and then conceal the fact that it has been cheating. Technically, this is possible, but nobody has ever suggested it has happened. This is an article taken from the Los Angeles Times in July of 1969. This article was discussing the punch card electronic voting system, which we successfully used in Sarasota County from 1969 until we implemented the new electronic system in 2001. The debate about elections technology is not new, evidenced by this. But in 1896, when the lever machine was implemented, there was much brouhaha and concern by the voters that they no longer had a paper ballot, and the lever machine was now the state-of-the-art election technology. Now, with that said, I know there is a debate, and it's not just in Sarasota County, across the country, about the new electronic voting equipment. I want you all to know that the concerns are taken very seriously by me and by my office, and as I know, they are taken seriously by you. I have spent countless hours meeting with the various groups. I have met with the ACLU, I have met with the Sarasota Alliance for Voter Education, I have met with Democratic clubs, I have met individually with individuals and spent hours in my office at logic and accuracy tests. We have spent time answering the questions of concerned citizens. I don't take their issues lightly, and I know you don't take them lightly either. But there's a lot of information that's a lack of understanding. So today I would like to help you, the public, and the various groups to be able to understand. I reviewed the information that Chairman Thaxton sent to me. I've also reviewed just about every bit of information that has been written across the country over the tenure of this debate that's been going on. I have listened to the pros and the cons. I've read reports. I'm very well up to date on the information that is available. And basically, it boils down to 4 different areas. Recounts, undervoting, the security of our system, and a paper audit trail. So I'm going to address each of those 4 things for you. But before I do that, I'll give you a little background on Florida's election system. Florida's election system is a very decentralized system. It is composed of the legislature, the Department of State, or the Division of Elections, which is under the Department of State, and the 67 supervisors of elections in the state of Florida. Now, each of us have separate responsibilities. The legislature creates the election laws. The Department of State can do binding interpretations on those laws. They also have been given the authority by the legislature to adopt the rules regarding minimum standards of voting systems, including the electronic systems, and they certify those particular systems. They also have the ability to develop other administrative rules. And in recent times, they have developed administrative rules on recount procedures and voter intent, just to name a few. Now, these rules are promulgated after a lengthy process. It's open process, open to the public. They do public testimony and do public hearings. So it's a very lengthy process. It's very open. And eventually, these rules become law under the Florida Administrative Code. And my office is obligated to operate under the laws of the state of Florida and the Florida Administrative Code, which are actually laws as a result of these rules being promulgated. Not only that, we are now under the Help America Vote Act, which is a federal bill that has issued some standards and requirements for us in the state of Florida to implement. I'm happy to say that our election laws are in compliance with the Help America Vote Act laws. So Florida had to make very few changes in their laws as a result of the new federal bill. Okay. In 2001, after all of the confusion that happened in 2000, we're all familiar with some of the issues of the 2000 election, Florida enacted the Election Reform Act of 2001. Now, in the Election Reform Act of 2001, one of the big things that they did do was they decertified the punch card system, they decertified the paper ballot, and they decertified the central count optical scan. That left supervisors in the state of Florida 2 options. We could go with the optical scan system, or we could go with the touchscreen system. 15 counties opted to go to the touchscreen system. 42 others had to migrate to a precinct count optical scan. And those counties primarily went with the optical scan, not because they didn't like the touchscreens, but because their counties did not have the budgetary ability to go with the touchscreen system. The largest counties in the state, with the exception of Duval County, went with the touchscreen system. Supervisors of elections, along with the BCC, selected the system, and we did have lengthy discussions. I had public hearings. We had people come in, all the stakeholders. The commissioners were there at our open house where we had all of the equipment, touchscreen and optical scan. We had the disabilities community. We had the poll workers come in. We had the general public. It was very open. Then we had discussions with you all before we went ahead and bought the system. One of the big factors was the disabilities factor. This system provided the ability for blind and visually impaired to cast a secret ballot. Now, why is this important? It's extremely important because Duval County, the only large county in Florida that did not go to a touchscreen system, has been sued. There was a court order. The judge ordered them by August 31st to go out and buy touchscreens so that the blind and visually impaired would have the ability to vote a secret ballot. Recently, and I'm not sure if it's been in the last several weeks, the state of Ohio has been sued by the disabilities community as well. And this is happening in California and other places. So one of our big factors in buying the system is we knew it was important, and now the Help America Vote Act says that by 2006, every precinct in the country has to have at least one unit available for the disabilities community. Okay.
What's the difference between those?
The difference between
The
the
one you're
disability
getting for
unit
the-
and the regular is that we have a headset that we attach, and the ballot is read to the blind voter or the illiterate voter or the language impaired voter, someone that doesn't speak English really well, and they prefer to have it read to them, and then they can make their selections using buttons that they migrate through the ballot, and that is a secret choice, and they can do it on their own without any assistance from anyone else. Okay, let me talk to you a little bit about the two different systems. They are both electronic systems, the optical scan and the touchscreen. They both use software that has been certified in the state of Florida. And I think what some of the people who are asking for an optical scan system here in Sarasota County need to understand is that the same three companies that are providing that software for the touchscreens are the same three companies that are certified in the state of Florida for the optical scan systems. So the optical scan system uses Sequoia, ES&S, and Diebold for their optical scans. For the touchscreens, we use Sequoia, ES&S, and Diebold has not been certified in the state of Florida. Number one, we have some of the most stringent certification processes in the state. So their touchscreen has not been certified. But Bob Sweat in Manatee County right now uses that GEM software to tabulate his ballots. So if people that are concerned about our software should be just as concerned then about software in the optical scan counties. Same companies, and actually it's the same software that is used to do the tabulation on the optical scan systems. Now, why is this important? It has to do with our recounts. Okay. We have recount laws in the state of Florida. Chapter 102 of the Florida statutes addresses that, as does 1S 2.031 of the Florida Administrative Code. Now let me first tell you why we need these rules and why recounts occur. Florida is a voter intent state. Okay. We need to be able to get the intention of the voter that cannot be read by any of the machines. And this happens in the paper ballot as well as with our optical scan ballots for our absentee ballots. And we have a process with rules that have been promulgated that tell us exactly when we count something. This is something we didn't have in 2000. And we know what the voter is intending to do by the rules that have been set up and the procedures that have been set up. When Bob Sweat in Manatee County does a recount, he does not do a manual recount of the optical scan ballots. He runs them back through his software. I think that's important because there is the misconception out there that people think because there's a paper ballot that those paper ballots are going to be manually recounted. They are not. The laws and the rules of the state of Florida do not require Bob Sweat to do that. And in 2000 election, he did the recount using the optical scan and he ran them back through his reader. There was never a manual recount of those individual votes. So if we're going to trust the software for them to reread their paper ballots, it's the same software, the same companies, then I think we need to go with the particular system that is more accurate. And let me share with you some information about that. In 2000, on our punch card system, which again was tabulated by software, we had a 1.71% undervote count.
What was that again?
1.71. This presidential preference primary, we had a 1% undervote count. Now, yes, people do go to the polls and they leave ballots blank for whatever reason, and we can't always get into their minds. But in the California recall, Rebecca McCurry, who is a PhD, who is one of the experts that many of the groups are citing, did an election analysis in the Arnold Schwarzenegger recall election. The punch cards had a 5.6% undervote rate. The optical scan system had a 2.8% undervote rate. And the touchscreens had a 1.9%. I think it's interesting, and in the state of Florida, again, in our presidential preference, we had a 1% undervote rate. The state of Florida, with the counties that are using the optical scan, had a 3.19% undervote rate. So, in my opinion, I would much rather have a 1% undervote rate than the 3.9 or the 2.8 that they had in California. The accuracy of this equipment has been certified to 1 error in a million votes. That's pretty accurate. And this has been done by the independent testing authorities at the national level and by the state of Florida in their certification process.
Commissioner Patterson.
In my opinion, you've just touched on a really important point that I heard quite a bit about so far in talking about the undervote. You're saying that in the Florida presidential preference primary, the electronic systems actually had a lower undervote than...
Not the electronic, the DRE system, because the optical scan is electronic too. So the DRE touchscreen had a lower under rate percentage.
I understand what you're saying. The point that had been made a few times by folks who are concerned about this is that in the presidential preference primary, you only had one item out there. So that's why I regard that as more important than the California primary, where even though it was a recall, there was more than one item on the
And these
ballot.
statistics were for the recall race only. And when I give you the statistics for our 2000, they were statistics for the recall or for the presidential race only. I extrapolated the presidential election. So we're focusing on one election. Let me share with you one other bit of information on this. There's a couple that live in Venice, some of our voting citizens, by the name of Martin and Marion Borofsky. Okay? They've been reading some of this information, and they forwarded it to their son. Their son, Cliff, is the elections administrator in Bexar County, Texas, which is the San Antonio area. Okay. He replied to them, which he gave them the permission to forward to me. And he said, the percentages in Sarasota County that are noted regarding the no votes or undervotes are clearly within what the voters have consistently demonstrated. He goes on to say, in November of 2002, we did a manual recount of 276,000 ballots. Among those, there were 20,000 ballots with absolutely no votes at all. Zero, zip, nada, niente, rien. I made them count every one. The voters clearly chose not to vote for the gubernatorial candidates. Now, he had 20,000 people that undervoted in the gubernatorial race. He manually recounted them and came out with that undervote race. This is not unusual. It happens all over the country. Statistics everywhere show that people go to the polls, even in a one-election race. It happened over in Palm Beach County, and people do not vote. The reason I know this for a fact is because following the 2000 election, I was involved in probably 5 or 6 individual recounts for the media and other organizations that were following up on the 2000 election. We held every one of those ballots up. And the questions were not, was it a hanging Chad or a pregnant Chad? The question was, how many ballots were actually there that had no votes in the presidential election? And in Sarasota County, we had 1,809 people, 1% approximately, of all of the voters that went to vote first ballot on the race that did not vote in the presidential race. I can't explain it. Other elections officials can't explain it. Sometimes it might be intentional. Sometimes it might be inadvertent. But the good thing about the system that we have is that every voter has a review screen at the end of their ballot. That review screen tells them if they didn't make a selection in one of the races. They have the opportunity to go back and make a selection or not, whatever the voter chooses. I know myself and some of the constitutional amendments in the 2002 election, I wasn't sure how I wanted to vote on those. I certainly undervoted and left them blank. It happens in every election. It has happened in every election since the beginning of elections. So it even happened in the Democratic caucus that we conducted April the 3rd in our office. My staff and I went in. We agreed to conduct the Democratic caucus for the selection of their delegates to the National Convention. It had to be done on paper. They had rules. You had to vote for 2 women and 3 men. The ballots could not be accepted if people wanted to vote for less than those required numbers. Well, we had people that came in, one woman in particular, and she said, well, I only came here to vote for 2 women. I'm not voting for 3 men. Had we taken her ballot, and the Democratic Executive Committee were there, or the caucus people, and we would not have been able to count it, and those would have been undervotes. It does happen. I can't get into the minds of the voters to know why it happens. Sometimes they don't know enough about an issue or a candidate. Sometimes they don't like any of the people that are running. In the case of Palm Beach and Broward County, with the 134 votes that people keep citing, there were 7 Republicans on the ballot. It was thrown into a universal primary because there was no Democratic opposition. And it's actually been documented that there were Democrats who went in there, said, I'm not voting for a Republican, and they didn't cast a ballot in that one issue race. There were others that said, I don't know any of these candidates out of the 7. And they got there and decided they weren't going to cast a vote. So yes, Broward and Palm Beach had 134 undervotes. Nothing unusual.
Ms. Dent?
Yes.
The example you gave of the gentleman who manually recounted the 200,000 some odd votes in the other state, I've been hearing that as a major reason for the optical scan over the touch screen, in that certainly if the software is faulty the first time around, it's probably going to be faulty the second time around. In other words, if the software program that was used to originally count the optical scan ballots messed it up the first time, simply having the machine do the same thing with the same faulty software, it's going to recount incorrectly the second time.
And
now,
that is the way
which is the same argument.
Optical scan ballots are recounted
No, well,
in
that's
the
not
state
my
of
point,
Florida.
though. Let me finish my point.
I'm sorry.
Because the same thing is true with the electronic voting machines. I mean, if you go back and redo it again, if you have a computer do the same thing 2 or 3 times, aside from computer glitches, which we all know happen, whatever programmed information it has to make those calculations, it's going to make the same calculations every time. If there's faulty programming, it's going to be faulty on the recount. The difference being is that if, let's say for instance the press, if the press had reason to suspect that the software was faulty, not by intent, but just simply programmer's error or some innocent electronic thing, at least with the optical scanner, we have the option of having the paper cards and having a verifiable, another way to verify the election results, whereas with the touch screen, you don't have that third option
Yes,
for
but
the
we
recount.
do.
Well, explain to me how you have that, because I don't follow that.
Part of the debate is about an audit trail. There are some people that would like to have a voter verifiable paper trail. They would like a receipt in the precinct. With the lever machine, we never had a receipt. With the punch card, we never had a receipt. With the optical scan, no one gets a receipt. But we do have a paper trail, an auditable paper trail. If the media or a court says they would like to look at our audit trail, we can print that audit trail out. Every individual ballot record of every person that voted in an election can be printed out, and it can be reviewed by anyone that has the need to review
But
it.
Kathy, that's an interpretation of the voter's intent, where the
Not interpretation.
optical scanner is a direct connection. You have your pen in your hand and you touch the paper and you make a mark. Then the machine interprets your intent. With the touchscreen, you touch the screen, the interpretation is made, and then the paper trail is created. Where the optical scanner, there's no paper trail from the time I make my decision and touch the screen. There's no paper trail between me and the software. Where the paper trail, there is a paper trail intervening my intent and the recount with the optical scanner, where I can completely bypass the software. There's no bypass, there's no software at all that's needed to do a recount on an optical scan, because it goes my pen to the paper to the box. Where the electronic machine, it goes my pen, it's touching, but my pen to the software, to the box, and there's no way to bypass the software.
No, actually, when you touch that screen, it goes from the screen to computer chips, which are not software. They are stored in 3 separate computer chips inside the Ivotronic in each individual machine. Those computer chips are redundant for a reason. If there was going to be an issue that one of them failed, the other 2 would be able to record those votes. And not only that, they would tell us that the machine was not operating, and we would immediately shut the machine down at that point. None of the votes that have been recorded in those computer chips, it's not software, it's recorded in the computer's memory, and we can recover those votes. That is what we take to print out the ballot record. It's been done in other jurisdictions. The ballot record has been printed out. We have the ability to do that on all of the DREs that are in Sarasota County. It's not software. It's actual recording of the votes in the computer chips.
Commissioner Staub, Commissioner Patterson.
Just 2 questions. One on if a court said you had to print out the ballots, what would it look like? Give me a line.
Okay.
Read the line to me.
Essentially, it would, it is randomly printed out so that we could never tie a particular ballot to a particular voter. It would say, for example, President George Bush or Al Gore. Then it would go to the congressional district, and it would say Catherine Harris or Jan Schneider.
Okay.
Then it would go to the individual races, and it would actually say who the voter had voted for. So we would be able to go ahead and manually recount those if it came to that. But bear in mind, the recount laws in the state of Florida do not require that, and we would never, short of something that was so close that we would have to go back and resort to the paper, which Bob Sweat would still be running through his software. We would still be printing out the individual totals from each individual machine. We would then compare those totals to the totals that we got on election night. So our recount rules for the touchscreen require that we go back and print out from each machine. Now that's a lengthy process. We would have to bring the machines back to our office and do that. Which brings me to...
I have one more question on
okay.
that. At the end of the election, at election night, you print out, or tell me how, the concern seems to be you can print out what's sent up to elections office, and if you have a printer, I guess, at each precinct or polling place, then why couldn't you have that printer print out a ballot? If you could go through that with us.
What is certified in the state of Florida is a system. Okay? To incorporate a printer onto our particular system would create a new design of the software to be able to tell that printer to print out each of those individual totals to provide a receipt. What we do right now is we do the totals for the entire precinct. So each machine would have to be readapted. It's not going down to Office Depot and buying a printer and sticking it on that. because it would only give you a total from all of the votes that were on that machine, the way it's configured right now. So it would be a total redesign of the software to allow this to happen. Then that software would have to go through the independent testing authorities at the national level, because Florida is one of the states that requires that certification. Then it would have to go to the Division of Elections, and they would have to do their certification process on the system. We can't just add even a little thing or make a little change without the certification process. And each time some change is made, it goes through that certification process. We're delivered a certificate from the Division of Elections about that they have certified that system before we can use it. I can't defy the laws of the state of Florida. I can't use something that's not certified. And the misconception out there is people think that I can just go out and buy a printer. The certification that Mr. Matthews talked about yesterday, his son was involved in, in computers and printers. He can go get something certified to go out and sell, but it's not certified as a part of the system that we have to have certified before we can legally use it in the state.
Commissioner Patterson.
There's a contradiction in what you just said, and maybe I'm understanding it wrongly, or you didn't mean to say what it sounds like you said. You're basically saying in a recount, if it were necessary, we have the capability to print out an individual ballot.
Yes.
If you have the capability to print out an individual ballot
Why don't
in
we
a
do it?
recount, why couldn't you do it?
Different process.
Why? I mean, I guess I don't understand that. I mean, the one thing I had thought all you had the
Design.
capability, wait a second. I had thought all you had the capability of doing was printing out the totals, really, basically as, X percent, and then reprinting out a total, just running it in a different way. But if you actually could demonstrate that you could print out 2,000 ballots that reflected each individual's vote, even though the names weren't attached, at the end of the whole voting, I guess I don't understand why you couldn't do it separately.
That's a separate process. Each machine would have to come back, be attached to our a different component of the software that has been certified. It's a different component for us to be able to print those out. That software is not on the iVotronics themselves in the precinct. That would have to be, the machines would have to come back and individually be hooked up and connected to the software that's on our main computer in my office to be able to do that. Again, the recount rules in the state of Florida do not require either Bob Sweat or me to go through this hand process. This would only be in an extreme circumstance if a court ordered it, or if the media requested it as a public record or something like that.
So what do the recount laws require that there was some conversation of actually changing the law? What was all that about?
It had to do with the intent of the legislature when they developed our recount laws in Chapter 102, that there was a difference in how we counted with an optical scan, or recounted with an optical scan and with a DRE. And the intent of the legislature at that time, they took into acknowledgement that there would be some differences in how it was going to be done. The Division of Elections came out with an opinion that says we are not to produce that record. So one of the senators wanted to implement something into the bill.
Oh, to force you to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
But with that said, our legislature is going to be finishing up on Friday. It does not look like they're going to be changing our recount laws.
For sure.
So I'm not sure, what's going to happen, but Bob Sweat will be running them back through the software, and we will be printing out each individual unit, which we will have to come back and do an individual tape after the fact, because at the precinct level, we cannot print each individual machine. We do a totals at the end for each precinct.
Commissioner Mercier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know how to start this conversation other than to say, I think, the integrity of this county is, my opinion, above reproach, and we've proven that historically in our elections and how we conduct ourselves. And what concerns me is the energy that's being put into our county when it's the other counties that have caused us this grief and aggravation. And I wish some of these groups would take the pressure and put it on where it belongs, not here. But I have a multi-question into the voting, just to show where I think we may be going with this hard copy, if you will. Let's say JRD. I go to the screen, I press a vote. At the end of voting, it shows me my selections. Is this what you want to do? And I press vote. If I decide to change my mind, I put up my hand and they can come back and I can make corrections at that time?
No, you
No,
can
no,
do it
no,
on
no.
your
You
own.
could make them independently. All you
But-
have to do is touch that particular race. It takes you back in the ballot to that
Okay.
race, and you make your selection. You don't have to have assistance.
Okay, so then if that's the case, what happens if we had a printer right there and I vote and I decide that that's my vote, it prints my form, and then I have to put up how am I going to correct the paper copy?
That's a good question, and that's one of the issues that people that are looking at this paper receipt issue are trying to determine. Furthermore, then, what is the official ballot? Is it that paper receipt, or is it that what's recorded in the electronic voting machine? Right now, there is nothing that has been certified for me to be able to do that. There are some prototypes out there, but there's nothing that's been certified in the state of Florida for me to go and provide that paper receipt for individuals. Down the road, if the legislature changes the laws, if the recount rules and the rules are changed, if the federal government tells us that we need to have a voter verifiable paper receipt, then of course I'm going to be the first in line over here asking you for more money to do that. But right now, my hands are tied. The laws don't permit it. The laws of the state of Florida, I have to have a certified system, and there's nothing manufactured that I can buy. Yes, there are prototypes, and there may be some, and there are some things out there that they've been experimenting with. They've tried some things in California. There was another jurisdiction, I believe it might have been in Connecticut, that did some test elections using this paper receipt, and there were some problems. It's like taking a really brand new technology that has not been tested and just shoving it down people's throats and saying, okay, this is what we're required to do, and we could end up in a bigger mess than we were in 2000 as a result of that. What people don't understand is to implement a system takes a period of time. It takes training of not only me and my staff, it takes the training of the poll workers, and it takes the training of the voters. You just don't rush into implementing a system in a hurry-up kind of fashion. Technology is continually changing. There may be something down the road that will be developed that will do another audit that is not going to require a piece of paper. We don't want to rush to judgment. The newly formed Elections Assistance Commission, which was put into place as a result of the Help America Vote Act, is May 5th going to be taking testimony. They are looking, one of their things they were charged with doing is to establish voting system standards. They're working with the National Institute of Science and Technology in developing these standards. But they, again, are not going to rush to judgment. They're going to do the research, and they're going to do it correctly. So am I saying we'll never have a paper receipt in Sarasota County? I don't know. If we're required to do that, absolutely. Again, I'm going to be the first one to come over here and ask you all for more money. Do I think it's necessary? No, I really don't think it's necessary. This technology has been proven to be the most accurate that is on the market. Even our Chief Information Officer in Sarasota County reported to Chairman Thaxton that he thought that this was the best and the most accurate technology that was out there.
Commissioner Mills.
I've been all over on this issue. Well, actually, I've been to two places. First of all, when I first heard it, I said it's political, and we're in an election cycle, and we got to kind of sort that out. And then I said, well, maybe it's technical, and frankly, I've come full circle. I think it's political. And I was brought into this process really kicking and screaming. I'd been on the canvassing board for many years here in the county with Miss Kester and right on down the line, Miss Gherkin. And we had a great punch card system. It was very reliable, very reliable. And to do away with that system, whether some counties hadn't maintained theirs and they had pregnant chads or hanging chads or whatever, we didn't have that problem. And I, again, had sat through many an evening of recounting, coming up with maybe one vote difference over a period of time. Again, we were told to replace our system. That was the law. They said, look, folks, you have some choices. I believe you came forward and said you thought ES&S was the preferable system. You know, we talked about the other. I think the other one was somewhat less costly, but just from a historical perspective, we ended up with the equipment we have. And, you know, as far as there being some sinister hacker flying around that is going to destroy the election, we're going to hear that right up to election night. And if one side loses, you're going to hear it real loud. And I recently received a notice of attending a Medicare forum over at Selby Library. I'm of that age now. I thought, man, I better learn a little bit about Medicare. And so I go over there and find out I'm in an opposing party pep rally. Everybody had on buttons of the other side, and it ended up being it wasn't a description of Medicare. It was saying that we have to replace the present administration. So I think we have to sort through that, the wheat from the chaff. And I have the opinion right now, based on the information we have, that this is the chaff, and that there is no merit to the discussion, and we'll continue to hear it up. And if it wasn't this, it would be something else.
Ms. Dent, please continue.
Okay. There's more to an election system than just the equipment that's used. And much of it has to do with the administrative procedures that are in effect in implementing and using these systems. And we conducted our logic and accuracy test, which is certainly required by law before every election. And I know most of you have sat on one canvassing board or another, are familiar with what we do in the logic and accuracy tests. We had many of our citizens, for the first time ever since we've implemented the system, show up for our presidential preference primary election. I spent 2.5 hours going over with them, answering questions, showing them our security procedures that we administratively have implemented. And two of my biggest detractors, I guess I would call them detractors, I guess questioners, walked away saying they're very comfortable with what we're doing in Sarasota County. Their concerns are on a broader scale. They're concerned about the rest of the country. But they were comfortable with the security procedures that we have implemented in Sarasota County. I'm not going to go into each of those procedures because the Herald Tribune did print in a guest editorial column today each of those separate procedures that we do use in Sarasota County. I don't know whether you've read it or not. I'd be more than happy to go over those, but for the sake of taking up the county's time, I won't individually. I can supply you with that particular information. I will say that sometimes information can be distorted. It can be distorted to support a particular position. And I know in some of the literature that you were provided prior to this meeting, I'm just going to give you an example of how things could be distorted. There was a Carnegie Mellon University study that was cited, and it talked about in 1989 how many computer insecurities that there were. By 2003, there were over 100,000 computer insecurities. what the people tried to do was equate that to voting equipment. As it turned out, it was talking about, this Carnegie Mellon study was talking about computers in general. It was not talking about voting systems, it was talking about computers. And with the onset of the internet and being hooked up to the internet, yes, even Bill Gates with Microsoft has had some security issues with people getting into his system. But our voting system here in Sarasota County is not hooked up to the internet. When we go into the polling place on election day, those machines are plugged into the wall for electrical power. They are not networked to each other. They are not hooked up to the internet. Our software downtown, where we do the tabulating and the reporting, the tabulating for the absentees and the reporting, is standalone. It's not hooked up to the internet. Now, I'm not sure how someone is going to get into that system to hack it and to make changes, because we have security rooms, everything is locked up, keypad and lock. We have dual or tri-control. No one's ever alone with any of our equipment or with our activators, which carry the ballots. And yes, if we were online, we were on the internet, then we could have these people come in. But our system, and that's an internal process or security procedure that we have implemented. Another question that comes up.
Well, Kathy, before you leave that one, ES&S in Indiana, I think, I don't know, wouldn't say it was malicious, but they installed some uncertified software in some machines there, many counties there. Now, I don't think anybody's saying that uncertified software changed any votes or anything, or if they're saying the uncertified software altered the election results. But clearly in that instance, they were able to put in software that did not meet the certification process, and it was by chance that someone caught it. So what safeguards do we have in place to make sure that the software that's certified is actually the software that's interpreting the results of the chips?
As we do all of the installing of any update to our system ourselves. ES&S never comes near it.
And they didn't do that in
And that
Indiana?
certification has gone through the certification with the state. I get a certificate in hand before Larry Rose and the rest of my staff would ever consider using it. We would be breaking the law. We would be subject to felony penalties. Now, I'm talking about administration. Some of these jurisdictions are under pressure because of the Help America Vote Act to change their voting systems. Some of these vendors are wanting to sell equipment. So it's basically an administrative issue. If people are crazy enough to go with software and install it on their equipment that has not been certified, then they need to get the press. If a company is going to install uncertified software, it's an elections administrator's problem. It is not equipment problem. It's not the public's problem. There's a problem with the administration. State of Florida, we do not use anything that has not been certified. And I have all kinds, I have the most incredible technical staff in the world, and there's no way they're going to install something. And we have to get word of the certification in a form from the Division of Elections before we would ever change our software.
Why is it that this software is not published?
Why is the source code not published?
Yes.
You don't want your source code published. Let me tell you why. We throw that source code out to everybody in the country, and all of those people that are out there, these young kids and these computer gurus, would be trying to hack into it.
I thought they can't.
They would be trying to come up with ways to manipulate the software. The source code is in escrow with the independent testing authorities, which is separate from the vendors, separate from any elections administrator.
Who sits on that?
The independent testing authorities, there are several different private companies that do the testing for the National Institute of Science and Technology, and they have that in escrow. The Division of Elections has that source code in escrow. At any time, they could compare the parameters of the election and the software that we're using here with the source code. We don't have the source code. So my staff, my gentlemen who are programming my ballots, they can't alter the software because they don't have the source code to alter that software. But you don't want everybody in the country having that opportunity to go out there and review the software and then work on ways to come up and manipulate an election. Personally, I'm very comfortable that it's in escrow with independent people, separate from the vendors, separate from us. And there's always the ability to go back and check that source code against what version of software we're using, and it can be proved. For every election, we're required by law to send our parameters of the election to Tallahassee. So they know exactly, because Larry prints out the parameters and ships those up there via disk to Tallahassee, and they can make those comparisons anytime that they would want to do a check and balance.
Commissioner Staub.
It seems to me that we could go on with this.
Probably could.
And I know that, you've answered a lot of questions. You've done a lot of good public education, I think, today, but I know privately with individuals and groups you've done that also. I think if the state or the federal government declares that we need a paper ballot to verify, that will probably happen by the next election. But I think what I've heard you say is, if we sat here and all 5 of us said, let's go and do it, we can't do it. You can't get it certified. The state's got to do that, and as far as I'm concerned, that's where political pressure ought to be. We physically couldn't do it with being able to do it. And so those people who are concerned, and I have to tell you, I talk to a lot of people, groups, and they're not concerned with this. If they are concerned, what they've told me they're going to do is request an absentee ballot. They fill it out, they know they're doing it, and they trust, and they always have trusted that when they mail it in, that it's going to be processed correctly at your office with the canvassing board. So, frankly, I think we should start moving on unless somebody wants to try to do something that I think would be impossible. I'm comfortable with where you're headed this time. If something changes, we're going to follow the law. So that's where I am on this.
Frankly, those absentee ballots that the people request and send in are processed through the software the same way.
Right.
So,
but they can
the
actually
same way
fill
that
them
it's-
out, and they know they've signed it, and they know who they voted
But
for.
in a recount, are we going to manually recount that? No. Unless they would happen to overvote on the paper ballot. You can't do that on the DRE, or undervote it. And then, yes, the canvassing board would have to take a look at it for the voter intent. But I just wanted to maybe say...
Ms. Dent, before you go on, you sound like you're concluding, Commissioner Patterson wants to say something. And just to clarify what Commissioner Staub said, we do have one option which is legal, and that would be to convert the entire system and all the precincts to the optical scanners, which is the same unit that we're using to count the absentee ballots.
But it doesn't get us anywhere.
I'm not suggesting it
Okay.
did, but
Okay.
we do have one legal
Okay,
option to
right.
avoid the touchscreen systems, and that would be to actually leave the touchscreen systems in storage and buy all new systems and retrain everyone and use the touchscreen August 31st, or excuse me, use the optical scan August.
But again,
31st.
Chairman, if we had to do our statutory recounts, which is a 0.5% difference...
It'd go through the
in
same
arrays,
software,
through
manufactured by the same person.
the same software,
Right.
manufactured by ES&S.
Understand?
We would not be manually counting those optical scan ballots. We would be separating the overs and the undervotes and taking a look at those.
Commissioner Patterson.
Well, and here's the thing. I don't think there'd be any support for doing that at this board. It doesn't make sense. We've all sat on the canvassing board at some point or other, and those optical scan ballots are not crisp and clean necessarily either. We've spent a lot of time looking at things and saying, did that person mean to fill out the circle or didn't, and, trying to rule on what's consistent and fairly interpreting what's done on a piece of paper that's marked up maybe not as accurately as people intended. And I honestly think what we've got is probably crisper and more accurate than that process. There are also some practical considerations. If you really had a paper, and I hesitate to call it a receipt because it does nobody any good to take it back away with them. It would have to be reviewed and stay with you to provide the record for a recount. You'd have to have some long, complex ballot issues printed out on this thing that people would actually be able to review. The old punch card system, you could look at that punch card out of its little slot till you were blue in the face and not know if you'd done it correctly or not. So, you know, I appreciate you coming here today, and I also appreciate the accuracy and professional way in which your office has always run. And I do think it's important for people to get the type of questions answered that we asked today, because if we didn't know the answers, you know, how could we expect the rest of the world to? But I do agree with Commissioner Staub. It's time to move on, and if there's new technology that's certified that maybe is better, we'll sure talk about it.
I'd just like to close on a note that you had said. There are a large number of my staff that are here today because they have spent the last 3.5 years really implementing the system and working as hard as possible. I'd like them to stand. Will my staff members that are here today please stand? These people,
Who's watching this story?
I want personally and publicly thank them. And let me tell you why. I get this partisanship issue thrown up. The Help America Vote Act was formed by 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. They have gone on record to their congressional members to talk about the fact that they're not for their paper receipts. They are ready to let the Elections Assistance Commission do their stuff. But with that said, I've got Democrats, I've got Republicans, I've got independents on my staff. They have the most integrity of any people I've ever seen, the most commitment to the process, and I've never seen a group of people in my life work harder to ensure that we have good elections in Sarasota County. And I just want to publicly thank them and let you know that any of you in the audience would be more than happy to have them on your team. And I just thank you for indulging me in that.
Thank you. Okay. I think that's going to take care of this agenda item. And for those that still feel uncomfortable, I think Commissioner Staub made an excellent point. We have the only 2 systems that are certified for use in the state of Florida are available for any citizen in this county to use at any time that they want to. Well, obviously, once the ballot is known, they can use the optical scanners. And so...
What? Optical scanners?
Yeah.
They could request an absentee
ballot.
Oh, absentee ballot.
Right.
Okay. Well,
Let
people
me
know
just-
it as absentee ballot.
One more thing out there. We will be doing in-office absentee voting in all of our 3 offices, unless the legislature in the last couple of days changes it, 29 days prior to an election, for people to come in and vote in-office absentee on our DREs. If people choose to have the optical scan ballot as an absentee ballot, I encourage them to do that, but I would just like it to be on the record that each of those ballots costs the county and the taxpayers $6 additional to process and to send out. And they will be reread through our software. So for those that are more comfortable doing that, absolutely, they need to do that, but they should maybe keep these other things in mind.
Could I just ask, so she can publicize, if someone does want an absentee ballot, how do they do it?
Call my office at 861-8600. They have to give some information, and they can request an absentee ballot. On our website, there is a request form. They can download it, fill it out, and turn it into our office, and we will make sure that everyone gets their absentee
And
ballots.
they can do it for both the general, primary, whatever.
They can do it for the general and the primary and the general both for this year. The law requires that that people request an absentee ballot once a year. So anytime after January, you can request for absentee ballots for every election for the entire year. There have been some changes with the Help America Vote Act, and military and overseas have a little more leeway and they have a longer period of time to receive, and they don't have to continue to make those requests. But thank you very much. I'm, again, very grateful to have the opportunity to share some of this information with you.
Okay, Commissioner Mercier, one of the last words.
I wasn't going to bring this up because we've beaten this to death, but if you're going to do absentee ballot, having sat through the logic and accuracy, I've got to tell you, it does cost $6, but more importantly, you have more likelihood of your vote not counting because we've seen it all.
That's what I was
A
trying to say.
husband signing for a wife signing for the husband, signing on the wrong place.
No address. for
No
the
address. I mean, it
witness.
just goes on, and so I'll tell you what, the touch screen is far more accurate than the absentee ballots because some of those just don't come in. The handwriting changes. Sometime we do check the handwriting. We don't just accept. So this is serious. Absentee ballots are serious.
But
They
if
should be
people
taken
aren't
that
here,
way.
they really need them. That's what I wanted them to know.
No, but if they're not
They
here,
could-
but
yeah.
for those people that think they're going to work around the system, as I said,
Oh.
it becomes painful to have to say, did this person really sign it? Or maybe the signatures look alike, but they're different names. And it's one of the spousal units that have signed for, somebody else.
Thank you, Kathy.
Moving on.
Chairman.
We're scheduled for a break. No.
Let's go on.
Okay. Next item on the agenda.